You are listening to The Real Men Feel Show with your hosts Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but you don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel Show is produced live each Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. Listen to us on podcast platforms including iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also watch the show on YouTube by visiting realmenfeel.org/YouTube. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at realmenfeelorg and on Facebook, facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Show your support for Real Men Feel by shopping at realmenfeel.org/swag, by visiting digitaltipjar.com/realmenfeel, or even text us a tip. You can show some love for Real Men Feel by texting Real Men Feel, that's all one word, to 504-226-5306. You'll receive a link back to complete your tip and choose the amount. This is a weekly program, and your reviews, comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in our Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's dive into this week's show.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Real Men Feel. I am your host, Andy Grant. Real Men Feel is all about giving a place for men to feel. Ta-da! What a genius name then. But it's about giving a space for you as a man to express your emotions, to allow for the emotions. We aren't here to tell you what emotion is right or wrong. We're just here to encourage you to allow for them, to express them. And in the co-pilot seat for the emotional expressions are my friend and fellow coach, Appio Hunter.
Hey, Andy. Always good to be here. Always good to be feeling along with everybody else.
Awesome. And tonight I'm really excited. We have author, coach Owen Marcus joining us, and we're going to talk about the fact, I'll call it a fact, when we'll find out if it's a fact, that masculine emotional intelligence is not an oxymoron. So, Owen, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Andy.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And so it sounds like your work is along the lines of encouraging men to feel as well and dealing with the emotional resistance and residue and just all things emotional that men have going on in their lives.
It is. I mean, as you know real well, we're trained not to feel as men. And now, as you were mentioning about the TED Talk, my approach is that really, particularly ever since the Industrial Revolution, when men weren't around to really show us how to be emotional, feel, and express those feelings, women stepped up and they trained us, which is great, but we missed something. We missed how to do that, how to, be emotional, feel emotional experiences and express them as a man. So sometimes what happens for us guys is we sort of get frozen in, how do we express and how do we interact emotionally as a man?
And how did you first get involved in this sort of work? Were you a natural expressive guy trying to help others? Or
quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. So short story is, I didn't know it, but I'd grown up with Asperger's syndrome and dyslexia and a few other things like a speech impediment. And so I struggled with communication, emotional intimacy. I was very tense, physically and emotionally. And so 40 years ago, I had to dig myself out of that hole. And the more I did, the more I started connecting with my body and my emotions. And the more I saw that my relationships got better.
So the more you cultivated your relationship with yourself?
With myself and my emotions. And I, being dyslexic, like a lot of dyslexics, I sort of cheat, doing it the way that most people do it. I just couldn't do it. And I facilitated that process by getting a lot of body work. Part of it was I had a roommate in Boulder back in the mid-70s that given up his law practice of 8 years to learn how to be a rolfer. And he argued his case so well that I said, hell, I'll try it. And I did, and ended up becoming a rolfer. And And that was really my initiation into all this, loosening up my body, loosening up my emotions, and spending 4 years in Boulder. I was really fortunate to study with people that were, starting the foundation of somatic psychotherapy.
So is that the notion of, and I'm not familiar very much with Rolfing, so is it the idea of emotions are really locked in some of your cells in different aspects, resulting in tightness and stress?
Yeah, people come to us generally because they have a physical ailment like back problems, and we're usually the person of last resort. But if it's stress, soft tissue, or structure, we're usually pretty successful. And what these people start to find is a lot of their stress was more than physical. It's all those little stressors that we have in our life that just adds up. And the thing is that fascia, which is what we work with, that connective tissue that holds everything together, is the organ of stress. So it could be a physical stress or it could be emotional stress, and it could be a major one. In most cases, is what I call micro traumas, a lot of little stress over time that adds up. And one day you wake up and you can't move, or one day you wake up and your wife is gone because you haven't been communicating.
So I'm actually kind of curious a little bit more about the Rolfing, because I have heard of it before, but I never quite understood the difference between what Rolfing is and like a deep tissue massage. Because I know that deep tissue massage oftentimes is supposed to help work out the stress as well.
Yeah, it's a unique therapy. It's not massage, but if you were watching it, it would look like a slow, discontinuous, precise massage. It's deeper, but not harder. It's slower. And we have a couple unique goals. One of the first ones that Dr. Rolf started with was that our bodies look, perform, and feel better when they're in alignment, when they work better with gravity, which we sort of know, but we don't think about. And we certainly don't think that we can change that. So it's not moving the bones, it's moving the soft tissue that pulls the bones out. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, like I was saying earlier, fascia is the organ of stress. So really, we're not dealing with acute stress, we're dealing with chronic stress. Structural, soft tissue, physical, emotional stress that's held in the body. And thirdly, and this is maybe the biggest thing I got, was that a person starts to learn how to relax. And we're not trained in this culture how to relax.
That's so true. If anything, we're trained to hold it all in and retain it there in the body. So really what you're doing is kind of working in a systematic, holistic approach. Like there's nothing that's disconnected from anything at all. And it's all designed to help release the emotions and get more in touch with it, but through a more physical process, right?
Exactly. And one of the reasons it's so substantial and sustainable is that the nervous system learns how to relax on a fundamental level. And also the body and its structure, it just starts functioning better. So that a lot of what was causing the strain goes away. And part of what we work with is changing habits. And one habit that I've worked on Olympic marathon runners, no one breathes to their full capacity.
Yeah.
And one of the businesses that we had in Scottsdale when I had a clinic there was a mindfulness stress reduction company, which essentially was teaching people how to breathe. Because if you're breathing in a relaxed way, you're not stressed. So the first thing we do under stress is we alter our breath.
Yeah. It's the more shortness of breath. And
we hold it, we shorten it, and then it becomes habitual.
Interesting.
So is the notion of not expressing emotions and stress, does one lead to the other? How tied are they?
They're intricately tied. One does lead and sort of lock in with the other. And one of the things that we work with, and I work with a company called Everyman, we do these trainings where we really work with the physiology of the body. And so one of the things I teach is that a lot of what we think is psychology is really physiology. And one of the fortunate situations I had was I just happened to be studying with and hanging out with a guy that literally wrote the book on PTSD. And his name was Peter Levine. He was going to be a Rolfer. Dr. Rolf said, "Hey, Peter, I really like you, but you just don't have a body for a Rolfer." So he went off and got a couple PhDs from Berkeley, and he credits his dog as his impetus for learning how natural physiology around stress and trauma works. And essentially what happens with stress or trauma and what turns it into PTSD is that we don't get to fully experience the stress, the trauma, the emotion in the moment. So we go to this, we think of fight and flight, but there's a third F, which is freeze. We freeze, and we're hardwired as mammals to do that to survive. And so when we do that, even subtly over time, we, in a psychological way, disassociate and we disconnect with our emotions, our body, and other people. And so a lot of the work that we do is getting men reconnected to their emotions, their body, and to others, and they all work together.
Cool. So are all your workshops and courses are very hands-on and physical experiences?
Sort of. They're not physical in the sense of manipulation, but they can be physical in a sense, we do some things are more physical rather than sitting. And then I created a process called the healing journey, which can be very physical, because, guys, we are physical. One of the things that's unique about men and emotions is that more than women, often when we have an emotion or when we really want to express it, we got to move. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that we work with men, and they start doing that, and literally that energy or emotion starts moving through their body, and they don't feel so stuck.
It's interesting that you should mention that you should bring that correlation between emotions and movement, because one of the things I've done in my own workshops is talk about, if you break down emotion into its component parts, emotion. Now, like tell people, think of emotion as everything in motion. And if you can think of that as that energy is always flowing and always going, then you're able to release it more often. Exactly. So I like that correlation that you brought up. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also like an evolutionary basis for that as well. I remember reading in a couple of different books that our brains evolved to work best when we are in motion, because oftentimes when we made fast, quick decisions, when we were running away, when we were actually trying to catch food or trying to avoid becoming an animal's meal.
Yeah, we're meant to move. There's a lot of ways to explain it. Like horses can lock their joints and stand and sleep. Mm-hmm. We're not meant to be static. Our bodies aren't meant to just stand. Of course, it can, but we're meant to move. And one of the things I work with my clients is that I tell them, look, our genome is 99.9% the same genome that we had when we were in the tribe. So really, we still have that body of a caveman. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean we have to do everything a caveman did, but when we start going further and further away with that, and that might be sitting at a desk, looking at a screen for 8 hours a day, our body's going to have an impact from that.
For sure.
And we need to move, and particularly for men, movement is often a form of expression.
Yeah, I definitely have experienced that personally myself. When I'm moving, I definitely seem to be much more in tune rather than sitting and being sedentary.
Yeah, and you're doing it now. You're moving, your head's moving, you're using your hands. Yep. And you look at studies that rate people in terms of charisma. The people that have more charisma are the ones that have more coordinated body movement. They look, they're connected with their body and how they move. When another study was done showing that pickpockets and criminals read people's bodies, and they can pick who to rob or attack by how they move.
Now that is really interesting, but not surprising, really.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, because we're so habitual in the way that we move, it makes sense.
And to get back to what you said, instinctually, we're all sort of predators as much as we're prey, and we can read that. We consciously don't know what we're reading usually, and that's what I teach people so they become more conscious of it. But unconsciously or instinctually, we know what a movement means.
Yeah.
So it's all the things that we're not consciously taught now, but are in the genome and are with our ancestors.
In the genome and the body. And years ago, I used to do body reading for attorneys. And I remember once we had a big case down in Texas, an oil company, and they brought us in to help with jury selection, to read the bodies and all that. But I said, look, here's the real problem. You look at everyone. They're all dressed in flannels and jeans, and you're in three-piece suits. lose the suits. But it's like we don't, and this particularly as men, the more educated we get, we don't trust our intuition and common sense. And that's a lot of what women are telling us in terms of how they want us to communicate. They want us to just be more real and more connected to our experience.
So is that one of the reasons that men struggle more emotionally? It's this not trusting of our own emotions?
Yeah, I think it is. We find that in a lot of work is, and it was certainly a lot of my beginning, was that I don't even know I'm feeling in the beginning. So often we get a guy, we ask him, like in our free groups, what are you feeling, Sam? And he gets this dead look on his face. Oh, I'm not feeling anything. But inevitably, if you look at his body, it's doing something. He might be clenching his fist, he might be tapping his foot. We let him do that for a moment, and then we bring his attention to where he's moving his body. And then maybe to another area. And inevitably, after a minute or two of doing that, and then we ask him, what do you feel? And then once he's felt his body, he can start feeling his emotions.
Right. So do you notice that a different movement, a specific tightness in the body relates to specific emotions, or is everybody different?
Both. Everyone's different, and there's certain patterns. I mean, you just did one that I don't think you did for the reason that you might notice it is often if under stress, we'll lift our shoulders up. That's an anxiety response. So what happens though is when you have a particular emotional archetype, we'll say anxiety, it could be anything, you'll develop a body posture or structure around that emotion. So you might be walking around hunched up and and just in that state of anxiety where your body is accentuating that state constantly. So it becomes self-perpetuating.
Yeah, that's interesting because usually when we're doing our shows, I always try to be very conscious of how I'm sitting. Because oftentimes, if I'm really engaged in a conversation, I usually do like kind of like hunch forward and I start to like actually kind of tense up a little bit. At least my body does. So I try to be conscious of that and sit up a little bit more straighter so I can actually. And you reminded me of that when you talked about breathing and how we oftentimes do not breathe to our full capacity. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not sitting in the right position, so I can breathe properly.
Beautiful, because that's what I tell people. I mean, you sit or stand in the position that allows your breath to be the easiest and the fullest.
Indeed, I love that.
But if you're not taught that, you might sit like this all the time and all hunched over and think that's your best stand.
Exactly, and most, if not everything we were taught about posture is wrong. For example, we're taught shoulders back, and that might be your drill sergeant or gym teacher teaching that, or it could be a yoga teacher, and it's like open up your chest. But then I say, well, you're opening up your chest at the cost of tightening your back, or you're standing up, holding yourself up with your upper back. So one of the things that happens is literally and metaphorically, we use structures in our life to do a job they're not meant to do. And that in itself creates strain.
Which kind of speaks back to our evolutionary past, which is we're always moving. We were healthiest and best and most emotionally connected when we were always moving.
Yeah, moving and connecting to people, because as the research shows, and we all sort of know, we need people, and we were connected to nature too.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, and when I listened to your talk, one of the things that I was really curious about is when you yourself started going through that journey and connecting, about your experience when you started your first men's group. I would love to hear about your experience about that, the process that you went through and some of the challenges that you ended up facing. And
Well, I did that because I'd done other work and had worked on and healed a lot of my Asperger's and dyslexia, but I still had this sort of wall, and it was around men and relationships. And I resisted it, and I go, oh, okay, if I'm resisting it, it probably means I should go in that direction. I called up a friend of mine in DC, got some suggestions, ended up starting a group in my office, and that was a little over 20 years ago. And that was when I was down in Phoenix. And from there, I did several groups. And then 13 years ago, I redesigned the model for men's groups because I really wanted something that was even better. And I integrated all the things that I'd learned and that were working for me and my clients. And I asked 11 guys, they all said yes, and that just took off. But I remember that first night of the first men's group in my office, and sitting there, and I couldn't leave because it was in my office. So I go, oh, I'm stuck here. I don't know if I want to be here. And I was nervous, and literally, I really did not feel like I was a man. I would have had a hard time saying I'm a man. But what was really interesting was as we went around that circle, there was probably like 10 guys in it. Every guy in his own way was saying or feeling what I was wanting to say or was feeling. And by my turn, I started feeling really pretty comfortable because I did not feel like the outlier. I felt like, oh, I'm as messed up as any other guy. And that's one of the biggest things that men see is that, we're in these emotional silos as men. And it's when these guys come to these groups, they realize that they're more messed up than anyone else, and that there is a particular way that men connect and are emotional that is really natural. So there was a guy that is in one of our groups, and he was telling me this a couple months ago when he came, probably 9 months ago, and he was an ex-attorney, and he sat there, and we usually let the new guy go first, and he was really nervous, but by the time his turn came, he realized that no one was going to judge him. And other guys that by that point had cried and expressed about every emotion there was. So he felt free to just be himself. Right. And there aren't many places where men have that experience.
So is that the core of why you're such a fan of men's groups? That freedom, that realizing, I'm as messed up as the average guy or everybody else?
Yeah, that's a start. It's a start. I think the biggest thing is that there's a special magic that happens when guys get together and they're willing to be authentic, whatever that means for each guy. And we're tribe animals, but men in particular are tribe beings. And we have several vets in our groups. And these vets really miss the military primarily for the brotherhood because they know what that is. And, they've lived and died for that brotherhood. And so what happens with these guys in the group is once they start to experience that brotherhood, they start to learn, maybe first vicariously, and then they learn by trial and error. They learn at least by suggestion. And the core tenet in all our groups is to take men deeper, to take them into their own experience. And our tenet is that, within you is everything you need. It's just that you've gotten disconnected from some of your resources. And by taking you deeper, we're guiding you gently into experiencing these parts that have been disconnected. And when that happens, you make a connection to an emotion maybe you never made the connection to, or part of your body, or sometimes a thought. And the guy leaves feeling more whole. And over a course of months, this man has transformed himself, but usually all his relationships.
So the notion of brotherhood, do you find that can be made just on that initial check-in in a very first meeting, that first going around a circle, the brotherhood can be felt right then and there?
It can be. And what happens is guys are vulnerable, men start to feel brotherhood. Yeah. You could say, it's in a more primitive way, as we expose ourselves, and we don't feel as a threat to other men. I think it's more in that. Men start to trust other men when they're vulnerable. And one of the things I'll often say in our trainings is, in this setting, we're changing the rules. Here, you get honored for the courage it takes to be vulnerable.
Yep, that's a core thing that's behind Real Men Feel, and imagining what if that was the version of masculinity and being tough and all that was recognizing the bravery it takes for someone to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to risk showing all of their emotions. So I love that sentiment.
Yeah, and risk losing control. I mean, that was always a big one for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because that is a big thing for men around the world. And it doesn't matter what culture you're in. There's this need to be in control, especially of your emotions, because, kind of going back to what you're, the core of what you're talking about, how over the past 200 years or so, the only example that we've had of emotional intelligence is that deeply feminine example.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think underneath a lot of the Me Too stuff and Harvey Weinstein, we're seeing the consequence of the symptoms of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of talk, which I'm really glad there is, and a lot of diagnosis, which is all right. But we are talking about, all of us here, really going to the cause of it.
Yeah.
Changing the cause. And when men connect to themselves and to others in this way, we have made a fundamental change. And we have men in our groups that literally said on the record, in our film and other places, that if it wasn't for the group, they would have committed suicide.
Yep, I don't doubt that. So I feel like we're kind of kicking it, touching from edges. So let's just call it. So what do you mean? What is masculine emotional intelligence?
It's your ability to be emotionally connected to your own experience, so that you're not only aware of it, but you're accepting it. And then from there, being vulnerable. And then from there, reaching out and connecting. I call it the ROC formula: relax, open, and connect. And so when we relax into our own experience, then we open up to be vulnerable, and we reach out to connect, we are emotionally intelligent as men. And and on a whole, men and women are more similar than not. But again, there are certain things, be it cultural, be it genetic, that makes us different. And when men learn that from other men, they show up better in all relationships.
Love that.
Yeah.
And because that's a thing that, the kind of the may not be a joke that, the secret behind this whole show is that, men and women are pretty much the same, but most guys don't know that, resistance to that. But I like how you said it best, that no, they've been trained differently. So at the core, again, we're all emotional beings, have the same emotions, but we've been taught and told there are proper ways and improper ways that we allow them, express them, admit them, show them, all of that.
Yeah, and it's, through guys seeing other men do it first and then having an opportunity to do it with other men, they get to practice. So our groups are like weekly dojos or training sessions, and we get to work this stuff out. And so when the man goes home, he's immediately just connecting to his family in new ways.
Yeah, I really love that. So I'm curious if your definition of masculine emotional intelligence has evolved over time, or has it pretty much remained the same since you can
both. I mean, it's pretty much remained the same. What's evolved are some of the the edges, the aspects of it, and we just gotten more and more efficient at teaching it. But we don't teach it didactically; we teach it experientially, and we've just gotten more and more proficient at doing that. Be it in one of our weekend trainings, where we take a group of guys, up to 50 guys, and they have life-changing experiences, in part because it's a group of guys being authentic and vulnerable, but also because of the choreography we put together, and give them different experiences that they normally wouldn't have had on their own.
Right. And
so are these adventures, are these journeys that you do, are these all in Idaho where you are, or are you traveling the world offering different things? How is this come into being?
Well, I up-leveled and joined Everyman, or everyman.co, and it's the second E's missing. And we've taken what I've been working on and just enhanced it. And now literally we're going all over the world with it. And basically, it's a platform for guys to start their own men's groups. The core of that business is to really have guys start their own groups, their own independent groups. And we wanted 20 guys or 20 groups just to prove that we've done it. We got over 60 now all over the world. And it's just word of mouth pretty much. And so we're working on really launching that platform and other things. But part of what we've done is we've done some trainings, we call them open source trainings. We're doing another one in a couple of weeks on the East Coast. And we get like 50 guys and from all different walks of life, all different ages, from all over the world. And they're ready for something different. And we put them through this training, and it's not confrontational. It's quite the opposite. But we do things outside. We do things in a big group. We do things in a small group. And these men travel a long distance internally in the course of 48 hours.
Cool. So I'm familiar with the Mankind Project's Warrior Adventure Training Weekend. So, but I've not heard of another network of groups like theirs until now. So that's really
yeah, this is something that's been in the making for a while. First with me, and now with Every Man for a Year, and we still haven't officially launched yet, in the sense of, we have a site up, but it's a real beta site. And even without all that, guys are finding us, because I think the Mankind Project does some great work. Their focus is on the New Warrior Training Adventure weekend. Our focus, even though we do trainings, is really on the groups.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're, and I'm working with Dan, the guy that started this company, and we're creating a whole training, a year-long training for men in groups. And we have other things in the works, mentoring, because we know the power of these groups. And we want these men not only in groups, but we want their groups to succeed. And, after doing this all these years and talking to and meeting guys from literally all over the world that have groups, I've learned how a lot of these groups start to fall apart.
And how's that?
Well, I think one thing that happens is guys, we like to learn techniques. Because it's like, just give me the bottom line, teach me the technique, and to go out and do it. And that's great, but after a while, you could be proficient at a technique, but that technique has its limitations. So we teach skills and principles, which are a little harder to learn, but then each guy in each group get to apply those skills and principles in their own way. And so you're going towards mastery, which is never fully attained. So that's challenging for men, and men like challenges.
Sure, yeah. It sounds to me also that you're incorporating something which is a key component because of any learning, which creates a lifelong process and journey, which is including context. Because, I was going to mention that if there's one thing that I've certainly experienced myself is that if I just teach me, just give me the, bottom line and teach me what, the skills I need to know, but without any context or background, it only takes me so far.
Right. Exactly. I'm a guy, and it's like, I just give me the short answer and I'll go do it.
Yeah.
But fortunately, years ago, I was trained with people that had this other approach, and I struggled with it for a lot of different reasons. But once I started to embody it, once it started to become somewhat of a conscious, unconscious competence, where it was something I didn't have to really think about, I really saw the power of it, and it was so much more fun.
Yeah, I can definitely connect with that. Yeah,
you start getting into the zone.
Yes. And I would probably add on to that and probably say that if you're able to go through understand the full context and go through the whole process, if anything, it makes the learning and the journey faster and easier and more fun. Like you said, more fun than trying to just jump straight to the bottom line, because then it just drags it out.
Right. And I think in general, particularly with what we're doing, is predicated on learning it with other guys, which helps build the brotherhood of the bond, and you learn in doing that. And because it's not a technique, it's something that's more organic, and then it's easily generalized into the rest of your life. So what happens is the guy goes home and he's learning that he's feeling things. He's learning how to feel, how to express, and he's struggling with it, but he's learning. and he just naturally starts practicing it with his partner. Where you go home with a technique and you try a technique with your partner, you know how well that's going to work.
Yeah, oh yeah, it doesn't go over too well.
Right.
Yeah, we've all tried that.
And when you've been trained in a technique and a how-to structure of something, you go back home and you're doing your how-to-ness. You've lost that group. So the organicness,
Right.
The notion of its skills and needing more practice to keep building the mastery that you've spoken of. Is that another part of the purpose of
yeah, and exactly. And so guys, have homework that they create and they do it during the week. They come back and that's like maybe their next lesson, the next thing they're working on, and the group helps. And again, we're not giving them advice. We're supporting him, that man, and finding his own resources and maybe expressing something that he can't express. But once he expresses it, he just relaxes.
Mm-hmm.
And we know about neuroplasticity, and how our neurons, particularly our brain, is adaptable, and how when we create new neural pathways and we reinforce them, like a muscle, they get stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, we literally create new defaults in emotional behaviors, where guys will say they can't go back if they wanted to. They just couldn't go back.
Right. I love the old saying of, I'm stuck in a rut. And with enough effort, your rut can be a positive new pathway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're stuck there with other guys, which really reinforces it, makes it more fun. And, there's some accountability too.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
In your groups, is it an organic structure? Does someone go through your training, go back home and become the leader of a group, or is it just a circle of equals with no one kind of in charge?
Well, good question. Again, a little of both. What we found is it's usually one or two guys that take the initiative. And so for a 12-week program, they are the leader because they're the initiator, and we support that man so that he does a good job, so the group does a good job, and we support the group. But we work towards training him so he can train the group, so it is a leaderless group, or another way to say that, everyone in the group is a leader and taking responsibility for the group. And that pretty much happens. But I think at least initially, we need a guy or two to corral the men, start the group, have some focus until these skills get developed.
Right. Yeah, I like that. The notion of an initiator as opposed to someone in charge of the whole thing and forever going forward.
Right. And it's not an authoritarian kind of model. It's a open source collaborative kind of model.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to get guys that are more entrepreneurial that initiate. They're used to starting things. But they get all different kinds of guys in the group, and often what will happen is these groups go so well that, like with our group, they do this sort of cell division. They start creating other groups, because a guy could come in with no experience and no desire, and after a couple of years he has the skills and desires and says, all right, I'll take it on, I'll go off and start another group.
So that's how you've grown so organically and without, I think you said earlier, you haven't even launched yet. You're training groups of 50 men at a time, and you have 60 groups around the world.
Right. And one of the, probably the biggest areas, New York City. That's where we started, because we got there's three other partners. I'm in Idaho, Dan's in Bozeman, Montana, and the other two fellows are in New York, and Dan was there originally. And they had some good networks, and it just exploded there. And these guys in New York, and a few years ago I did a training for them, they're hungry for this. They want that connection.
For sure. Well, it's interesting, as you were talking about the site and so forth, I was actually checking it out really quick. And the very first place that popped up for me was right here in my hometown in Salt Lake. And the second one that popped up, funny enough, Andy, is right there in Boston, close to where you are.
Cool. Let's check. So again, So what's that? What's the URL? What is it?
It's everyman.co, and it's EVRYMAN. So the second E's missing.
Gotcha. Right.
Yeah, and that's now my main focus, and it's a great platform for men, and particularly groups and trainings. And we're we're really starting a movement.
Cool.
That is so awesome.
So in the past, you've had something called the Men Corps. Was that kind of?
We still have that. That's my nonprofit, and we're working with initiating a program for vets locally here, and that that is. I started that to support men and specifically men's groups, and one of our passions at Every Man, and one of my passions is to support vets. And one of our key men, Aaron, who I did a blog post on, or actually he did on my Men Corps site, just got out of the Army, and he's Special Forces, and he's one of the guys that says that the men's group saved his life.
Yeah.
So we really want to give that to other vets.
I like that. Speaking of resources and giving and so forth, now I understand that you actually have a book out there that can be a really good resource. Is that right? Yeah,
it's Grow Up, a Man's Guide to Masculine Emotional Intelligence.
Okay.
And it's the 9 stages that we go through when we mature as a man. And the premise is that it's a somewhat sequential sequence of stages, but they can, overlap, of course. And what happens because of trauma, stress, or because we didn't have support in a particular stage or stages in our development, it's like we create a hole. And as adults, we keep sort of tripping over to that hole or into that hole. And so the premise of the book is, okay, what holes are you tripping over? And here's some ways to fill that hole.
Okay.
And it gives a man a bit of a map to how to develop this masculine emotional intelligence that they never really had any mentorings for.
I really like that.
So is there one action you would most recommend to a man who is aware that he's feeling stuck, isolated, and just in general misery with the state of his life?
It's probably the thing that'd be the hardest, but I think the most powerful is reach out. And it could be in any way, to a friend, but in a more vulnerable way. So it's not that we don't have any friends as guys, but what I know from myself, and I hear from so many men, that generally when we left school or the military, we left that deeper connection, the real brotherhood with our friends. So I would say reach out in that more authentic, vulnerable way to another person, or particularly another man. And a man that has a good chance of being able to witness that experience, to be there and be able to connect to that.
Right.
Probably a more powerful way, maybe a scarier way, is start or join a men's group, because that's the purpose of these groups. And these groups will welcome any man that wants to do that. I know our groups will.
So is Every Man the site that people can discover all the different locations and go and they can just drop on in and just experience?
Drop on in, and if you contact us and you're in a city, we'll say, well, we got Joe and Sam in this city, contact them. Or we go, well, we have a couple of guys that are interested in the group. Would you be interested in forming that group? Well, we'll work with you in whatever way we can. And we're just creating more and more content to support that, and a mentoring program to help mentor the guys that are starting those groups.
Gotcha. So, for instance, if there's a location where there's a group which has been announced but hasn't necessarily been formed yet, would the process be to reach out to you guys, apply, and then you reach out to provide the resources and so forth and the training?
Yeah, that's essentially it.
Okay.
You let us know, and you agree to follow our protocols, which are really simple and obvious. I mean, common sense protocols.
Sure, yeah.
And with that, we'll go, okay, this is what we're going to do for you. And we keep up-leveling that. And that's what Dan and I are particularly working on. And Aaron, this ex-Special Forces fella, is the go-to guy for the operations. And he's the one that really interfaces a lot with these men. And, you know, we want more resources, you know, vis-a-vis money, so that we had more that we could give these guys.
Right.
But even with the limited resources we have, these guys are getting a lot. And what's great is a lot of these guys are stepping up and saying, well, I'll help coordinate. I'll help do this in this area. I'll help or assist in this training.
Sure, yeah.
Because one of the things that doesn't get spoken to, but I've always seen, is that as men, we want to contribute.
Yeah. No,
we want to make a difference.
Yeah, there's that sense of purpose that we have.
Yeah, that who you are and how you're showing up makes a difference in another person's life. And some of the most powerful meetings for a man is when a man is contributing to another man's process or life by just being who he is.
Yeah.
What do you have an ideal goal or, you know, a 5-year dream of what every man will look like down the road?
Yeah, we want 1 million guys in a group within 10 years.
Nice. I guess you've thought of that.
Yeah, and I think it's doable. It's really doable.
I definitely could see that happening for sure.
Cool.
And especially it's out there.
And we have another one. We want the president of the country to be in one of our groups.
Whichever president is in the office at the time, or does he have one?
He is or has been in one of our groups.
So a graduate goes on to become the president?
Yeah, we got one guy that's he's going to become a congressman.
Great.
Yeah, hey, that's a good start.
And I had a fellow that years ago, it was in one of my groups that ran for Congress. So yeah, but really, we want to serve all different kinds of men. And honestly, you know, one of our things is that we want to go beyond white guys.
Yeah, for sure.
And we're getting there, but that's one of our pushes, and we have a fellow that volunteered to take that on. So, yeah.
So most of your word of mouth level has been just a bunch of white guys.
For the most part. For the most part. I mean,
yeah. So it takes a little bit of more considered effort to reach beyond.
Yeah, particularly I love where I live. Probably the biggest downside of where I live, it's just too white. It's not like, you know, these big cities where you get the diversity as you all have, which I love, and you know, that's what we want. And our groups in those cities are diverse.
Okay.
But we want more of that.
Cool. And is there any sort of structure as to how long a man is in a group? Do you graduate onto something else, or some guys in there for, you know, what's the longest someone keeps coming to the same group?
You know Jed Diamond? Yeah. So we were just talking like a week ago, and he started his group 40 years ago. Wow. And I have a friend of mine that started his group, it's close on probably 30 years ago. I've been doing them for over 20, and this current group for 13. So, yeah, it's something that it doesn't have to be, because we've had close to 300 guys through our groups in this area. So some guys certainly literally move on, some just move out of the group. But many just stay because they enjoy it. They keep getting something.
Great. Sure. So there's no requirement of your time is done, you must leave the circle or anything like that.
And no requirement that you have to stay either.
Right.
It's all voluntary.
Well, and as you mentioned, you know, that sense of brotherhood and that sense of continued a shared journey along the way. This is your tribe. Right.
And we as men, at least in this culture, don't have that. You know, in other cultures, maybe more primitive ones, we have it. We have it when we were younger.
Sure.
But as soon as we grew up, we got, particularly in this culture, very independent. And for most guys, if they have any kind of emotional support, it's their partner.
Right.
And my contention is no matter how good that relationship is, it can become strained if that's your sole support. So women literally come up to me in my town here, women I don't know, thanking me for the group because of how the groups impacted their boyfriend or husband, and the group. It's not therapy, but it's therapeutic, and it gives these guys something that no other relationship could give them. And it's a joke, these women say to the men, John, you're going to leave pretty soon. Your group, starts in 10 minutes. It's
don't want you missing that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. These women are huge supporters. And
Right.
in terms of social media, women pick up on what we're doing before men do. And they're often the ones referring people to us.
Yeah, that happens a lot. It doesn't matter where the men's group is. It happens a lot. It's the women who usually initiate it. And then ultimately what I found is that, to what you were talking about earlier is how it helps to enhance that relationship, because suddenly the guy feels like their partner, their significant other this person is so important to them in their lives, suddenly supportive of something that they want to do.
Yeah.
Even though they initiated it.
Yeah. And a guy, we're guys, and often we start out with hesitation, maybe resistance. But I will say in our groups in the last few years, easily 8 times out of 10, when a guy comes for his first meeting, he's sold. The vast majority are we ask for a year, they're in for at least a year, and usually beyond that. Because it's like, wow, this is not what I expected. This is more than I hoped for.
What do you find guys kind of with no firsthand experience or friends telling them what to expect? What do they expect?
I think you get the whole continuum from this is going to be a macho hangout to, sensitive guys is hugging and running through the woods naked or whatever. And it's neither. Yeah. It's just guys sitting often in the living room in a circle, following a simple protocol, like you said, checking in and just saying what you're feeling and what you want, being authentic. But what makes it special is this is implicit and explicit agreement that that's what we do. And so one of the things that someone taught me years ago is if we don't have a positive ritual in our life, we will create a negative one. So this group every week becomes his positive ritual. So if something's happening to that guy, he knows, in our town on Wednesday night, he has a way to get the support and do the work he needs to do to get through it.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, that really makes a difference in his relationship.
Yeah. And it's not a moment of vulnerability because you got drunk with your buddy. It's going with intention to be open and to share. Right.
Yeah. And we'll support you if you're not doing it in an authentic way. And in the beginning, we don't know how to do that, and we're real patient. All we ask is that you just show up and you give it your best shot. That said, I created a program that we use to teach guys. It's a 13-week program that became part of Everyman that teach new guys these skills. So they come into an established group and they can be somewhat overwhelmed because they see these guys that just are so real, so emotional, so authentic, so expressive, and they go, oh God, my head's literally, they'll say my head's spinning. So we create this program, so we chunk it down and teach them the core skills. So by the end of 3 months, they're doing it themselves, and they would have never thought they could.
Very cool.
Not don't give a man to fish, teach him how to fish.
Exactly. Yeah. And teach him with other men.
Yeah. Fish with all your buddies. That's the
fish with your buddies.
That's really cool.
I love that.
So, and you also did a film about men's groups and about your work?
Yeah, several years ago, a filmmaker came out to film us, and she contacted me in New York and said, I saw your blog, or I think it was a podcast actually. Do you know anyone in New York? Because I want to do this film. I said, yeah, well, here's my list. And she contacted everyone that she could find, I could find in New York. Not one group wanted to be filmed. And I said, well, let me ask my group. And they all said yes. So
every member was willing.
Yeah.
Wow.
For 5 weeks, she filmed us. And our spouses or partners in the community, and it was a documentary about men's group, our work, and what we do. And every guy said yes.
Wow. So what year did that come out? When?
Taxing my memory here. It was probably 3-4 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Still feels pretty recent.
Fairly recent, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Where was it featured? Was it featured at any film festivals or things like that?
No, it wasn't. It was featured once at a conference that the filmmaker and I went to a couple years ago at the University of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
We spoke and presented at a combined conference of the psychology division of the APA that's works with masculinity, and the academic version of academia that works with masculinity. And they did this dual conference, and we presented at that, on the film and really the work that we do in our groups. Because what we're doing in our groups, no one else is doing.
Right.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go on, I want to make sure that what's the best way for someone to learn more about working with you and to get the access into this world of men's groups?
Yeah, I have my own site, owenmarcus.com. That's an easy one. But for the men's group, Everyman. I mean, I'm putting all my effort into Everyman. It's an amazing company platform, and we have a whole team of men that are really committed to serving other men and getting them not just in groups, but having the groups really succeed.
Right. Great. So wherever you're listening to this, if you're looking for these links to the film, to Owen's books, to Everyman, visit realmenfeel.org, and I'll be sure to have everything that got mentioned, all the possible ways to track Owen down and to get involved and to see what he's created so far and to be part of future creations, be one of the million men in some of these groups. Then just visit realmenfeel.org, and the blog will have all the links to everything that's been discussed. Cool. And so we know and maybe someone listening now is going to be a future president of these United States after going through. Very good. Or why not you, Owen?
I know it won't be me. That I can tell you. That I know.
I know. It's like all the people who everybody thinks would be best for the job are the ones who most definitely don't want it.
Right. They're the smart ones.
Exactly, the smart and the sane ones. But you know what? If we produce the right guy, who knows what can happen once we get him into the White House.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about the successes and all the organic creation and things that you've built that have all kind of come to fruition and completion in Everyman. And I always like to ask, are there things that you tried that just didn't work? And like a group session that, so bad. All right, we're not doing that skill. We're not going to teach that technique. We got to, anything like that have happened?
Yeah, I've had technical glitches with a launch a year ago. My group here in town has been my beta tester or groups. And so we've tested some things that, sort of worked. Probably the biggest thing is that, I'm an instigator, maybe an innovator, but at least an instigator. And I'm always pushing the envelope. And I have to remember that other people go at a different pace. And I'm slowly learning that. So probably my biggest learning is to have patience and because I don't want to lead in the autocratic way. I want it to be more organic, and guys want to do what I want to do, and often that's where we end up. I'm learning patience.
And I get a lot of people that I come across, that people that want to be of service, and there's so much passion that you try to force even faster than you might have learned it. Now that you know it, you're like, I gotta fire hose these people with all the things I know about now and help them so much. And
we one of my main guys, Brad, and I were talking about that, because a lot of the guys started the group a while ago now laugh at that. Once they sort of got it, for a year or so, they were this evangelist that were trying to convert everyone, men and women. And now everyone laughs at it, but it was a little strong.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you find a brand new passion. Oh boy, you want to share it. That is such a human thing to do.
Well, and these guys immediately start seeing how it's made a difference in their lives.
Yeah.
And, they, in a genuine way, they want that for others.
Yeah.
But you can't force someone.
Exactly. It has to happen when they're ready.
Right. That
And
internal.
unfortunately, as we all know, that for men, it's a simple equation. It's what's greater, the fear or the pain?
Yeah. Pretty much that's what it boils down to.
Yeah. And once the pain becomes more than the fear, for a lot of guys, they start to do something. Fortunately, what we're seeing with the millennials, they seem to be a little smarter or more open, and they're coming to us in less pain, which is great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Definitely see that. I work within a company of millennials, and I see that a lot. Yeah, there's still some pain there, but certainly not from the level of pain that you see in my generation or older.
Yeah. So that has been, I think, one of the reasons that Everyman's really taken off, because that's sort of our core audience, and these guys are really hungry for that kind of approach, and they want to co-create it with us, which is what we want.
Nice. So you're really getting the popularity, the insurgence of people is the younger generation.
Yeah, it really is. From the late 20s to probably mid 30s, that's our peak range. And these guys are, they're bright guys, are open, and they're trained pretty well by women in terms of how to be open, which is great. A lot of us weren't, but they're hungry for that more masculine component. That's not macho.
Right.
So can you put a word to it? What is it? What is the masculine side? If it's not macho, what?
Human.
Can be better than that.
Yeah, and these guys, myself included, we learn how to just be ourselves. And when you get a group of guys to do that with, every night after your group, you leave with more energy. And so in the 13 years of doing this, and it's every week that I've been here in town, I've only had one meeting where I didn't leave with more energy.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's that's your fuel for the next innovation or the next instigation, if so to speak.
Yeah. And the fuel for other guys. We've had quite a few men launch businesses from our group in new careers. Did things that they couldn't have done, and I'm using their words, without the group.
Right. Yeah. Well, again, it all makes sense. You get more in touch with your body, with your feelings. You have more energy, as we said. Emotions and energy in motion. The body doesn't want to be stagnant. Our emotions don't want to be stagnant.
And then when you have the support of your tribe, it can be exponential. And the other thing I notice is that, often we start something like this because we want to fix something. We need a healing, something broken, or however you want to phrase it. But you ask, why do guys stay? Well, 6 months to a year in, most guys have turned the corner on the thing that brought them in. And they stay because not just of the brotherhood, but a big part of our groups is that we support men in creating not just the life they want, but the success they want. And it's like, in some ways, a mastermind, but the emotions are the core of the group, and it's not some heady thing, but with that support to go out and create, men have started new careers, started new businesses, new professions because of that support.
Awesome. Well, this has been really fantastic. I've discovered myself the power of groups, so I love finding out that there are more groups of men's groups that I'm not aware of. I'm definitely going to check out everyman.co. And again, if you're looking for links, visit realmenfeel.org. We'll have everything listed. So thanks.
Yeah, we have groups in Boston.
Yeah, I'm going there. I'm not going to edit the show. The show's not going to be released. I'm going to go spend my evening on everyman.co. No, but I'm definitely going to check it out, and I encourage everyone else to as well.
Well, and so check out that site. We're doing one of our programs. We still have a couple spots left for the open source one, next weekend, and it's in Massachusetts. at the other end of your state, though. But
what city?
Sheffield. It's at a lodge called Racebrook.
I'll find out.
It's southwestern part of Massachusetts, so it's a little over 2 hours outside of the city.
Yeah, I mean that's as long as Massachusetts is. You can't go much more than 2 hours.
Yeah, it's right. Unlike Idaho.
Or Idaho or Utah, where we are. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, everything here is not even a day trip. So yeah. Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate your time and all of your energy that you're putting into serving so many more men. I love your big audacious goals, and yeah, it was fantastic.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate you having me on and your support that you're giving men. That's hugely important.
Indeed. Well, it's been a great conversation. I'll have to add my thanks to it as well. So thanks so much, Owen.
You're welcome.
Beautiful. Thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, check out those links, check out those books, check out those classes, and get your butt to a group. Good night, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next week, visit realmenfeel.org or the Real Men Feel Facebook group and share what you thought of this episode. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Show us some love by visiting realmenfeel.org/swag or digitaltipjar.com/realmenfeel. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Appio Hunter at appiohunter.com.